everyone, I've got a best bits for you today. This clip is taken from my video on wide opening zippers. I'm showing you how to pin your lining boxed corners to your exterior boxed corners so that your lining stays nice and snug within your finished bag. And I will make sure that there is a link to the full video in the description. When we are pinning our lining, we have two options. You can box up your corners at the same time, or you can box them up separately and then baste them together. When you box them up at the same time, you're going to fold your lining so that you have your nice flat edge. And then you're going to take this entire lining corner, you're going to fold it over to meet up with your exterior bottom corner. You're going to line up the center seam from the lining with the center of your exterior. You're going to place that down on top of your exterior, lining up the outside edge so that it's nice and flat, and then you can sew across this in one go. So I prefer this method if my lining is the same size as my exterior and you haven't made any adjustments for that. The problem with doing it this way is that it will cause that exterior corner to tuck up a little. But I will show you how that will look. So with it lined up, the two flat edges together, clip at the side, make sure it's centered up, remembering that the lining is slightly smaller, so you are going to have a little bit of a gap at the outside edge. And then you can sew along here at 3/8 of an inch. This first side, we are sewing the lining and the exterior all at once at 3/8 of an inch. This is the same method as you would use for a boxy bag if you were boxing all of your corners at once. Backstitching at the beginning and at the end. Now we'll move to the other side where we will sew the exterior at 3/8 of an inch. Again, backstitching at the beginning and at the end. Sew the lining at 3/8 of an inch. And then take your lining piece and your exterior piece that are not yet joined together. Line them up, centers aligned. Again, your exterior is slightly wider, so that's going to stick out a little on either side. And then we're just going to sew along here at the edge of that seam allowance at around 1/8 of an inch. And that is pinning that lining to the seam allowance. Just keep your threads out of the way and just sewing those two corners together. And I'm just splitting the difference of that seam allowance there. It's sewn at a little greater than 1/8 of an inch. Trim all of those threads. Your pouch looks kind of strange, pretty flat right now. At the one end, you have your box corners that are all sewn together. And on the other end, they are just sewn together in the seam allowance. And we'll see how that makes a difference when we turn the pouch out. You can see first though, while it's inside out, that there is more slack here so that when this is inside of the bag, it's not pulling that lining quite as far out as it is on this end, which helps when you have a lining that is purposely drafted or you have purposely adjusted your seam allowance to make it smaller than your exterior to reduce any sagginess on the inside. I'm going to turn this out now through that opening. This is the position that you're going to want to be in for closing up your lining. So if you are confident in your bag, you can go ahead and do that now. I like to completely turn my bag out first, and then I turn it through to be lining side out again. But if you're worried about creases in your exterior, then you can always close that up right now. I'm going to poke my exterior all the way out. Make sure that I am pushing on my corners from the inside to get that seam to roll out. It can help too if you need to put your point turner in through the opening in the lining to get that corner to really pop out nicely there. And if you want to compare, this side here is the one that I joined these separately boxed corners within the seam allowance, and this is the one where I boxed them all together like you would with a boxy bag. And you can see that this one kind of curls in a little more, whereas this one sits much more nice and flat. So I think most of the time this is going to be the preference, to pin it just within the seam allowance rather than sewing it all at the one time. But again, if you have a pattern that does not have a size adjusted lining, then this is a really great option to reduce it coming up out of your bag. I will make sure that there is a link to the full video in the description. Hope that helps. Thanks everyone.